So welcome everyone to our BDO webinar on the some top tips for growing your NDIS organisation. My name is Mark Cushing. I'm a partner in the advisory team here in Brisbane in BDO. So on your screen at the moment, I have a bit of an agenda to go through. So I'll do a bit of a welcome introduction about me, a little bit more about me and who I am. We'll go through a bit of the 2016 survey findings, which had provided recently, and we'll have a bit of a chat about those. The sector insights, so what has BDO seen in the sector, and I'll give a bit of insights into some of the organisations we've been supporting recently and in the past around this sort of topic. Two focus areas that I'll be discussing today will be about digital enablement, and this is obviously about helping facilitate your growth agenda moving forward. And the second focus area will be on service expansion, the things you need to consider before you sort of looking to expand those services. The other parts of the agenda today, we'll have a bit of a chat about the 2019 NDIS survey, and then any of those questions that come through, we'll take some time to look at those and answer those. So a little bit about me. My name's Mark Cushing, as I said before, advisory partner in BDO in Brisbane, and one of the NDIS sector leaders for advisory in our national firm. I have experience in the NFP sector in health, disability, and aged care, and past roles that I've had have included being Chief Information Officer, and part of that role, part of those roles, sorry, was modernising services and delivering quality services to customers. Part of, I guess, my role within BDO is looking at strategy and transformation. Part of that is strategic planning, looking at service delivery improvements for clients, looking at business processes and how we might be able to redesign those to be more efficient, which is sort of around optimising and transforming those services. Looking at where we might be able to apply some advanced, innovative and emerging technologies, things like machine learning, robotics, workflow automation, those sorts of elements to help, I guess, facilitate more efficient services in the back end, and looking at business intelligence. So using data-driven insights to inform strategy. So a little bit about the 2016 survey that BDO had done. It was a bit of a readiness report. So the insights that we gained in 2016 was really about organisations starting their journey in the NDIS within the Queensland disability sector. 6 challenges were sort of identified through the survey findings, and I will, I guess, have a talk to about 3 of those and potentially a 4th one today. So the 6 challenges identified was the need to set or reset strategy for the new market. Challenges that organisations had was around cash flow and working capital management. The 3rd one was around transactions for growth. The 4th one was around marketing and engagement, and 5th one was technology challenges, and the last one was human capital and how best to utilise and retain talent. Today's presentation will touch on areas 1, 3 and 5, and probably a little bit on 4 as well around the engagement piece. So what are some of the sector insights? What are the things that BDO has seen and, I guess, successfully helped NFPs in the past? Some of these areas are looking at things like improving services, finding efficiencies, looking at expanding services and merger and acquisition type support. But just getting back to the challenges, a lot of the organisations that we've been dealing with, people are dependent on paper-based and manual processes, and when there's a challenge, I guess they throw more FTE or more staff or more people at processes to solve problems or to try and get services delivered in a timely fashion, which obviously results in overhead costs in the back end. A lot of challenges in ineffective rostering we've been seeing, and there's real risks, I guess, in the sector around client safety, but in particular staff safety. So some examples could be where the rostering environment isn't sort of linked to another system and the wrong person gets rostered into a situation, and not only puts themselves in danger, it puts the client in danger. And some instances, people have missed rosters, and then the people caring for the participant have to do overtime, and the overtime costs are quite costly in some organisations, and obviously impacting the bottom line. The award interpretation challenges around rostering environment and staff capacity, and looking at using, I guess, external service providers to deliver some of the services. Regulatory compliance risks and training challenges within the sector. And this is even more relevant when organisations sort of move across jurisdictions. So the rules between, let's say, Queensland and New South Wales are quite different from a regulatory perspective. A lot of the organisations that we deal with as well really don't truly understand the cost of service delivery at a service level. And as we've moved from bulk funding to activity-based funding, this becomes more relevant and more important to manage your costs in the back end as well and understand that true cost of delivery. Lack of system integration, key corporate environments like rostering, payroll, HR, and reporting. So when these environments don't integrate or don't talk to each other, there's a lot of manual handling to sort of do validation and sort of very heavy manual reporting on the back of those, and trying to sort of cross-reference information from different systems, and a lot of people involved in doing those. Which leads on to increased technology and back office staff costs, which really comes back to the financial sustainability of your organisation. Reduced agility to move with the changes. So when systems aren't integrated and aren't talking, and that change is coming through from the NDIS, it makes it a lot more challenging for organisations to be agile and move with those changes. Additional sector insights that we've been seeing, a lot of technology implementations aren't meeting the business needs. I guess this sort of comes back to not understanding the business processes, and today I'll talk a little bit more about that. And when you don't understand your business processes within your organisation, that makes it quite challenging to implement technology solutions and provide service delivery consistency. Limited technology investment. So, based on, I guess, the revenue of your organisation, organisations aren't putting enough funding into technology to run the business, grow the business, and also transform the business. Lack of business continuity and disaster recovery planning. So what actually happens if a particular incident occurs and some technology is not available? How does the organisation continue to operate in the absence of, let's say, a technology system that you would rely on from a day-to-day to do your work? There's a lot of poor quality customer data, which has led to sort of poor communication channels with customers, plan management, invoicing, billing, information security and privacy of client data and staff data is being identified as well as a key challenge. And service scalability challenges due to inefficient, costly back office operations. So as we do move down pathways to try and grow or expand our services, our technology environment or our systems aren't really in a place to support that scalability moving forward. So what are the two key focus areas I'll be focusing on today? Two of them are digital enablement, and I'll sort of unpack that a little bit further in detail, and some service expansion. The challenge with service expansion, which I sort of alluded to in the previous slides, is that unless you've got your organisation humming and running efficiently as possible, expanding services on a sort of environment that's not fit for current operations is only just going to lead to a bit more heartache and disaster down the track. So digital enablement, I guess, is the sort of first cab off the rank to make sure that you're sort of doing the best you possibly can in that situation. So move to digital enablement. So this particular part of the presentation is going to focus on how digital enablement can improve your service delivery. And it's probably from two aspects. It's not only just from your customer, understanding your customers and the customer journey, but it's also from your staff journey as well. So we'll be looking at, those improvements around quality of care, speed to which you deliver your services back to your clients, the experience that your clients gain, and the cost that it takes to do your business. And that sort of leads on to business process improvements, and this comes back to like standardizing those processes so that you can build technology around those, training in the future and knowledge transfer and understanding those business processes. And when you start mapping those, and you can actually then look at identifying areas for improvement, and that then leads to re-engineering those processes to meet your customer or market need. And what I can't sort of emphasize enough is that you really need to let your business processes dictate your technology investment. There'll be obviously vendors that will come in and have case studies and proven experience in delivering for other clients, but that's other clients, and you really need to understand what your business processes are and your business needs to make sure that that technology investment's going to meet your needs moving forward. Otherwise, you know, you're going to go down the same track as other organisations, and you're going to be spending more money on an environment that's not meeting your needs. And I guess at the end of the day, it's really about trying to improve your quality of service and reduce that cost of doing business and those overheads that you've got. So we'll do a bit more of a deeper dive into those two elements. So the first bit area I'd like to focus on is on how to improve your service delivery. And in BDO, we have a number of ways in which we can help customers with that. And one of the particular methodologies we use is on the screen there at the moment. And there's 7 steps or 7 components to consider. And I guess this is really all about understanding how your client feels about the service and how it interacts with your organisation. We also look at identifying any problems or inefficiencies within that process to improve that client experience and how they move through your organisation. And through that process, you're obviously discovering opportunities and actions which will then move to a different operating model or an ideal future state, if you will. So I might just unpack those 7 stages a little bit. And so the first one is really to understand each stage of the customer journey and how they interact with your business at a high level, so mapping those out. The second real point following on from that is the customer needs. And making sure that you're up to date with those changing needs. So customers, a fickle bunch of people that we deal with, and you know, one minute, you know, it's all good and rose and dandy, but you know, some new technologies come in and they've got a different need or a different appetite for the services that they are. So it's just about understanding those and how you might be able to move with those sort of changes in the future. It's really important then to look at your touch points. So where are the different points in which the customer deals with your staff, deals with your systems, deals with your processes, and all those different touch points, and what's their experience with those touch points and through that journey. Then we'd look at the 4th component, which is your customer processes. Understand how your customer interacts with those channels. So it's one thing to understand what the channels are, it's another thing to understand how they interact with those channels and what is the optimal, I guess, process for them to move through. You might be spending a whole bunch of money on a particular process that really the customers aren't really interested in moving forward. The customer experience is really important as well. So understanding how happy they are or sort of where their pain points are within your organization. And then what's really important from a 6th component is to understand data, using data insights, provide evidence on why you would change. So the data and the insights that you get really help you sort of get that evidence that you need to make the changes necessary. And the last one is really then applying those improvement opportunities. So looking at the gaps and where do we mature the organisation to get to that ideal future state, which is then, I guess, designing and defining your target operating model moving forward. And it gives you a clear understanding of the technology investment that you need to make in the future. The other way in which BDO works with clients is to take a user persona approach, and the user personas through either, you know, the customer or, you know, the range of different customers, whether they're a guardian or whether they're a young person that's interacting, whether it's an elderly person. What are those different people that are going to be interacting with your service, and how do we sort of make sure that those services meeting those range of different personas and different needs? And so on the flip side of that, with the staff, we take staff personas as well. So who are the key sort of staff, types of staff that you would have that would be engaging with a number of your systems and processes, and what do they need from the service delivery model as well? So just at a high level, we use this process to articulate and represent key stakeholder groups and really capture their specific needs. The insights from the particular staff or client needs is really about the future service design and how we design and what sort of technology comes into play to meet those needs. This approach also helps prioritize the key areas that need improvement. So, you know, there's always going to be a range of areas that need improvement, but you only got finite resources. So how do you spend the finite resources you have to make the biggest buck as far as improving your service delivery moving forward? There's a couple of little sample persona cards on the screen there, which really just goes through sort of details on the particular persona, what's important to them, what are the must-haves, what do I need to do my job. The should-haves and the could-haves are sort of less important, and then what's important as well is what they won't get through that process too, and sort of taking your organisation and your customers through that approach really then gets the organisation to feel a bit better feel on how they actually interact moving through the system. So that leads on to business process improvement, and I guess the key areas and the things that clients come to us around where business process improvement might be needed is around support services for transformation. So organisations are keen to transform their services. They want to look at operational excellence. So how do I reduce my back office costs? How do I make sure the operations of my business are running as efficiently as I possibly can? They're looking for performance improvements within their operating model. And a number of times we've used this as well to do efficiency reviews. So we'll go into an organisation and run this process and then come back with a whole range of different efficiency opportunities and the costs associated with those efficiencies. And if you are doing organisational transformation or optimisation, you really need to map those business processes so that you can look for those opportunities to improve and re-engineer moving forward. So mapping your business processes, as I just said, is critical for recording and communicating current state. Understanding where you're at is really important, and mapping them out and I'll talk a little bit more in detail on the level of mapping shortly. What it really helps with too is identifying areas for process improvement or risk mitigation. So when we've done this with clients in the past, we've identified, or a number of different issues have been raised. We can look at risks that the organisation didn't really know it had, and they can put controls around those. Analysing business needs and requirements for gathering for technology investment. This is crucial. A lot of organisations just jump straight into the tech without actually understanding the business process and mapping that business process, and then going to the technology providers and saying, these are my business processes, how does your technology meet those needs? And then post that, you usually come up with a bit of a gap analysis. So the tech vendor might come back and go, it's actually meeting 80% of your needs. This 20% is then up for grabs. Do the organisations want to spend additional funds to meet that 20% of your business need, or does the technology play a role in actually modifying the business process? But really important, I can't stress that enough, that organisations do that step. I know it's a bit of planning and it's a bit more time taken to do that, but it'll save you a lot of money and a lot of heartache down the long run. So just as I said previously, well, what does business process mapping look like? What I think most organisations we deal with understand very, very well is probably level 1, level 2, level 3 on the left-hand side of that diagram there. So they understand the functions and the high-level components and some of the discrete components involved with operating the business. But then the level 4, which is the detailed process mapping around for each one of those discrete components, isn't really understood. And I guess in the organisation, your staff can do these things in a number of different ways. So it's really important to map those out, and the organisation say, no, this is how we want you to operate, and this is how you'll do it, and these are the controls in which you will play a role. So there's probably a bit of greyness around that. So some organisations have done that well, but others, the majority, probably haven't done that too great. And whilst they know it, or it's tacit knowledge, the documented evidence actually is a really important process to go through, because it really highlights where improvements really need to be made, or where technology might play a role. How do people interact between what's a people process versus a technology process, and what are the approval steps and controls around that? And what we've also seen, the level 5 is really then the supporting policies, procedures, etc. on the back of that are quite limited to support those business processes moving forward. So once again, at a high level, just in summary, this mapping process provides transparency about responsibility for every step of the process. It's really important to understand those key roles, internal and external to an organisation. Those decision points and key dependencies in a business process and where it interfaces with technology are really important and need to be mapped and understood. And then this leads to the process where you can actually re-engineer your processes. You can look at it and go, I actually don't need these 5 steps. Why do I have 3 people doing this process when I can automate that step? And then by re-engineering those processes, you've made your, I guess, process more efficient, and then you're very clear about the technology you need to deliver those requirements moving forward. So I'm going to move now into service expansion. And what I've put on the screen there is our key steps to expanding your services. So at a high level, there's always going to be targeting that occurs. So you're monitoring the market, you're identifying potential areas for growth or service delivery expansion. And then normally what happens that we've seen is that they just jump to step 4, which is like, hey, let's get into it, all guns blazing, and we're going to just start implementing the particular outcome. What I think organisations need to spend a bit of time, and BDO's developed some tools to help with this, is that due diligence piece. So the strategic alignment in your organisation, that can be done quite cost effectively. Most of the information, I'll talk a little bit about these 2 steps in detail a bit more, but it's really important to understand the strategic alignment and where your organisation's going and the culture and brand fit of a particular service that you might be either acquiring or expanding into. The expansion planning is the next step. So that the first step around strategic alignment will give you a bit of a go, no go decision about, do I want to invest more time with service expansion A, B, or C, and I'll talk a little bit about how we get to that. But the expansion planning is really about understanding the complexity, the true cost, the time, and the priority in which you would expand those services. And it's really important that a coordinated, structured approach is taken to that, because it can lead to a whole range of challenges, which I'll talk about in a minute. Which includes things like safety risks, financial risks, reputational risks, legal risks around compliance, and cultural degradation if we don't handle the transition of some of those services appropriately. So move to the next slide. So service expansion, the 2 key areas from the previous slide that I want to focus on, the first gate is around that strategic alignment. It's a real high level assessment phase to inform a go, no go decision. So as I said before, you might have a number of opportunities you're thinking about. Go through this decision process tool and assess the strategic alignment to your growth strategy. You want to look at the strengths and weaknesses of doing those additional services, and then some high level quantitative and qualitative assessment using some data, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. The expansion planning component in a little bit more details is really, I guess, providing your board and your governance process with the rigor and comfort that it needs, that you've understood the complexity of and the cost and time associated with expanding those services. It's important to have a coordinated, prioritized, structured, and well-governed approach in those steps. A lot of your organisational risks and benefits will be identified through this planning phase, and that's really important to manage on the way through as you get to the implementation bit, and identifies key capabilities and resource gaps. So you may be taking on a new service under the NDIS that you have no real capability in, and how do you pick that capability up quite quickly? How do you fill those gaps either in resources or knowledge around specific things like compliance and those other elements that may come up? And the other thing that's really important around expansion planning is about BAU. You've got a business to run, and so these things can be quite distracting for leaders within your organisation. So having a structured approach and managing it effectively ensures that your BAU isn't going to be impacted as you're expanding your services. So the next one is really I guess a snapshot of an example of a tool that we've used in the past, and a lot of this is, I guess, built around the business's priorities. So for instance, the assessment description, even though we've identified 6 key areas, you could potentially add others if they don't quite meet your needs. But from what we've found from organizations going through this process, those 6 key areas really do, I guess, give you a bit of a feel for a go, no go decision around moving to the next phase, about expansion planning. So the first bit is really understanding that degree of strategic alignment and the degree in which your organisation supports growth. Now, your organisation may want to put that higher or lower, and we would go through a process with organisations to come up with a weighting, and then the organisation would score that. The services alignment is around just understanding that degree of alignment. How much is it separating from your core business, and is it making it easier to just expand on your core business offering, or is it a completely different part of the NDIS that you just got no knowledge about, and it could actually cause challenges down the track. Geography is really important, so degree in which you provide your services to local areas, and jurisdiction regulation, which I talked about previously. Your financial position, how financially viable are you? What sort of acquisition debt will be impacted through this process? Will it have an impact on your cash flow? And understanding the overall financial size of an organisation. Other parts of values, brand and culture fit is really important. How strong or how aligned are the values of the services that you might be expanding into? If you are acquiring a different brand, what is the strength of that brand in the community, and whether they're a direct competitor or some sort of other player in the market, and how healthy is that organization's culture, which you might be acquiring. And then the sixth one is really looking at transition pain. What are the costs associated with transitioning operations? It isn't a cheap exercise, and so you need to be sort of, comfortable that the cost of transition is something that you might be able to get a return on investment down the track. As I said before, the weightings are really based on an organisation's desire. So those weightings, while they're an example there, they are obviously variable, and the scores are variable too. What's important to an organisation is going to be different to another one. Strength and weaknesses are really important to capture on the way through, and then pops out a bit of a percentage around, if you were looking at 3 different options, you'd take the highest one. If something was a 60% probability of sort of proceeding, that's the one you'd probably focus on the next step, which is a little bit more investment in time and effort, which is the expansion planning. So moving into expansion planning, I'm just gonna, there's another tool on the back of this, but these are the key areas that you're gonna get a lot more detail in. And whilst the other one, the previous gate was all about, you could get a lot of stuff from, reports off the website, financial statements, that sort of stuff is quite easy to get. This one is a lot more detail. So when you're doing the expansion planning, you're pretty much in, collaboration or communication with an organisation or a service that you want to expand, and these are the types of details that you would probably need a lot more due diligence around and get a clearer understanding of what the transition pain are, a lot more detail around the physical assets, the technology that they've got, locations and service types, clients, the risks around clients. Are they violent? Are they complex needs? The value of those, the employees, what's the workforce look like, the pay rates, the overtime bonuses, the compliance elements, cultural perspectives, financial profitability assessment, what's the balance sheet look like, debt assessments, current liabilities, and data quality, the data that you may be inheriting, the employee data quality assessment, employee information as well, how complete is it, how current is it, how trustworthy is it. All this information is really important to then understand and start putting planning around, so that then you can move into an implementation phase with your eyes wide open. And most of the issues that you would need to address would be fleshed out through that particular process. It's similar to the one above, previous slide. So it goes through a weighted process as well. And once you've done this sort of detailed assessment, you may reassess whether or not you still want to go ahead with the expansion or not. So just touching now on our NDIS survey that's been launched in November, not long ago, and closing on the 13th of December. This is going to provide, the sector and ourselves with a deeper understanding of the NDIS journey and the provider experiences, looking at some of those attitudes and challenges. Now that we've got a couple of years down the track, this is not all about preparing for the NDIS. This is how we are actually coping during the NDIS and all the challenges that you guys have been facing with government changes. The things that we'll be covering in that survey is looking at the size of organisations, the types of services and revenues, the key challenges, how the transition status is going, the system ability to support, organisational alignment, future plans, funding sources, and the satisfaction with the government systems. Our plan is to make this information freely available and provide that back to the sector so that you can use that in your own planning or your own understanding of where you sit in your organisation sits amongst your peers. So really that is it for me, unless there's any questions that I have that I need to answer on the way through. But thank you for listening. So one of the questions has, with limited budget, where and should I start a digital journey with limited budget? That's a really good question. I guess for me, it's understanding the whole environment and understanding the root cause analysis of some of the key issues that you may have. So one of the things we've recently done with an organisation is to unpack some root cause analysis on some of the challenges and issues within the organisation, and then start looking at areas of risk. I always take a risk approach to, if there's part of my business that is causing personal harm or to my clients or to the staff, and digital enablement, there's a process in which technology can actually mitigate some of those risks, those sorts of areas, but I would be focusing on initially. I know funding's tight, and I guess it's about then planning for those other elements that you need to moving forward, and making your board aware of those other challenges and risks, using governance to help drive, I guess, further investment in digital tech where it can actually support outcomes of business. But it's really important to make sure that you understand the benefits of doing that and what is the return on investment around making that investment in technology. Is there any other questions coming through? If not, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you've found this informative. Bye.